Good evening and welcome to another Jazz Vespers service. Yvette, she's back in town, but fortunately, she's got her right shoulder done. She had her left shoulder done years ago. And so she's home and still in a little pain. The operation was done last Friday. And the day after her birthday, she went and had her shoulder done. So she'll be, like they said, about 6 weeks. She has to keep it sort of close. Anyway, so let's get started with our Jazz Vesper service. The verse today is from Psalms 100, 4 and 5. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For the Lord is good, and the Lord endures forever. His faithfulness continues to all generations. And the homily tonight, my theme is the harvest of gratitude. You know, it's no coincidence that this message falls in October, a season when air shifts, the day shortens, and the earth begins to prepare itself for rest. Farmers gather their crops, households prepare their tables, and we are reminded of the ancient rhythm of sowing and reaping. Harvest is about gathering the fruits of what has been planted. And in the same way, gratitude is the harvest of a faithful spirit. The psalmist writes, enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. These words are not a suggestion, but an invitation. Thanksgiving is not just something we do once a year when the turkey is carved. It is a way of walking, a way of entering into the presence of God. Gratitude is the gate pass that ushers us into his presence. Think about it. Every note in a jazz melody begins with breath, with intention, with listening. Gratitude works the same way. It is a rhythm we choose to step into, a practice that tunes our hearts like instruments, ready to be played by the Spirit. Just as jazz musicians improvise within the structure of a song, we improvise in life, facing challenges, joys, and the unexpected. Gratitude is what keeps us in tune with the rhythm, when the rhythm shifts. Now, gratitude isn't always easy. We live in a world that trains us to focus on what we like, on what we still want, or on what others seem to have. But the psalmist reminds us that the Lord is good and his love endures forever. Gratitude shifts our gaze from scarcity to abundance, from fear to trust, from worry to worship. Take a moment to think about your own harvest this year. Maybe it wasn't a bumper crop. Maybe the field looks thinner than you hoped. But still, what has God grown in you? Maybe it was patience. Maybe it was resilience. Maybe it was love that carried you through a hard season. Gratitude recognizes that every seed sown, whether in joy or in tears, brings forth a harvest in due time. When we gather for Jazz Vespers, we gather like a field of souls, each carrying our own stories, our own seasons, our own songs. But when we lift our thanks together, the harmony rises, and it becomes more than just individual notes. It becomes a chorus of praise. This is the harvest of gratitude, a community that remembers God's faithfulness and sings it back to him. And here's the beauty. Gratitude doesn't end with us. The verse reminds us his faithfulness continues through all generations. That means our thanksgiving today becomes a seed for tomorrow's harvest. When children hear us give thanks in hard times, they learn to trust God's goodness. When our neighbors see us live with joy despite life's challenges, that they witness the endurance of his love. So tonight, let's make gratitude not just a fleeting emotion, but a lasting practice. Let us offer thanks not only for what we have, but for who God is, for his goodness, his mercy, his love that endures forever. And let us remember that in every note of our lives, and every improvisation, and every rhythm we play, gratitude is the melody that never fades. So tonight, let us carry this rhythm with us. 1, a rhythm of thanksgiving in our words. 2, a rhythm of praise in our action. 3, a rhythm of trust in our hearts. For gratitude is not just the harvest, it is the seed, the song, and the promise that God's faithfulness will carry us and all generations after us forevermore. Amen. So now, Sabine, Sherry, and Don. So while they're coming up, Yvette, like I said, she just had her operation. But earlier this year, she'd had a few other projects, one of them being a documentary about women in the security business. And she's been busy with that, and it's finally completed, and it's wonderful. It's amazing. For years, people that was security, they never hired men, and so it's introducing women into that field. Anyway, Sabine.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. So good to see you. I'm always thrilled to be here every year. Thank you, Lenya, for having me. We actually, all three of us are troopers, kind of. We had very late last night gig. It was over. it's impossible for late. It was over around 1 o'clock. So, and in the morning, she was supposed to teach at her school and take your daughter to volleyball competition, whatever. And I had my regular church gig, and Don was probably also working, but we all didn't have enough sleep, but you guys given so much energy, so it makes it easy for us to survive. That was a long weekend. Anyhow, we're gonna keep our program with Mulgrew Miller classics. It's entitled Sequel, the Sequel. Go back, keep it here. Thank you very much. That was a Mulgrew Miller composition. Yeah, now we're gonna play Miles Davis classic. Thank you. It was all blue by Miles Davis. So we made our rendition of it. And now we're going to change the groove and go to Cuba. How many of you guys have been to Cuba or maybe like, oh, yeah, I've never been there, but I love Cuban music and I love to dance. I love to dance salsa and I like hip hop. So this is very danceable music. Feel free to step on your feet and dance if you have partner, or if you don't, doesn't matter. Well, it's a great tune by great trumpeter Dizzy Gillespie. It's entitled Manteca. And also, guys, I really highly recommend, I suggest you to watch great movie with Andy Garcia and For the Love of the Country. It's about life of Arturo Sandoval, who lives here. He's our local. So it's a great story, and of course, great music. And also, it was Dizzy's music, like all over the movie. So this is Manteca. Also, feel free to shout, Manteca! Thank you very much. I think this time I'm going to give my band a break, and I'm going to play some solo piece for you. So you guys can take a break and relax. And it's going to be a completely different thing. Not too long ago, I recorded a solo album that featured birds in jazz. Birds that fly, sing. And it's entitled Ornithology. And it's, unfortunately, I don't have a physical copy with me, but it's available on all platforms. Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, everywhere. And also, I submitted my solo album for Grammy consideration as Best Instrumental. So we are on the first round of voting right now, and I'm super excited about that. And I'm gonna play a selection from that. And it's a beautiful ballad by Jimmy Rolls. It's entitled Peacocks. Thank you. That was Peacock's beautiful composition by Jimmy Rolls. I think we have very last tune for us, for you guys. And we're gonna do a Cedar Walton composition. One of my favorite ones, it's called Firm Roots. Firm Roots. You're listening to Sabine Trio. I was so preoccupied with my morning tiredness, and I didn't introduce us properly. We have on drums Mr. Don Littleton. Keep swinging, great Don Littleton, and my very best bassist and friend, Sherry Lucetti. I'm Sabine. I have we actually prepared much bigger program for you guys, but unfortunately we have like less than an hour. So otherwise we would play more, but I have CDs on sale. It's my solo recording of all Monks music, everything except for one song. It's my original. It's entitled In the Key of Monk. That's what CD is entitled, In the Key of Monk. So if you want to take me with you to this evening, you're more than welcome. So we're gonna do Firm Roots. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for making our day. And you give us all that energy that we didn't have at the beginning. We were about to fall asleep. To be honest, that's musician's life, a little crazy. Thank you. It's a Cedar Walton composition, Firm Roots, and have a good night. night.
Sabine, Mary, Dawn. You're wonderful. You're wonderful. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming.
Shall we stand for the benediction? May the Lord watch between you and me while we're absent one from another. Amen. Thank you all for
Lenny,
coming.
should I play something?
Do-
You work at the church, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you know that. Maybe people know.
Okay. One more song.
But it's... Till we meet again.